Welcome to The Next Bit. I'm Hannah McQueen, and today's episode is a little bit spicier than usual. It's about sex after 60. Now, you probably don't even want to imagine your parents or grandparents are still doing it at that age, but trust me, they are. Sex, pleasure, and connection are not just for the young. To help us blow this wide open, we are joined by sex therapist Edith Horvath. She is an expert in later life relationships, intimacy, and why retirement villages are apparently a lot livelier than people imagine. Welcome, Edith. Thank you very much for joining us. So you're a sex therapist. Can you explain what that is?
Sex therapists are professionals who work with people around intimacy, sensuality, sexuality, and anything relational. Because sex, most people think it's intercourse, but there's a lot more around that. So people come to see me around how they feel about themselves, how they feel about their partners, how they feel about their history in sensuality, sexuality, and maybe what their future could be or would be.
Okay, so if we're talking about sex after 60, let's ask some pretty direct questions. Does sex have an expiry date?
No. It is really important to note that sex and sexuality changes through the decades, but I had a client in their 70s, and after divorce and a couple of not very successful relationships, he came to see me and said, I always wondered how it would be to be in a same-sex relationship.
Oh, good grief. We're going there straight away.
So it was really interesting to work with him because a lot of our conversation had to be around safety, because he never ever had anything to do with another man, how to go into a relationship, how to find somebody who would be open to that. And slowly we worked around this, and he went to another city because he didn't want to be in the same city as he normally lived around this. And he had a couple of sessions with another man, and then he decided, no, it wasn't for him. He better sticks with heterosexual relationships. So, it could happen at any time in your life, but I think as people age, they might be more open to different experiences because they think, I don't have that much more time, so I better get on with it.
Is that actually what they think? Golly. Okay, so let's bring this back to, does your desire change as you get older?
Can do. And some of it is physiological. Some of it is you are busy. You've got a lot more responsibilities as you go through the different decades, and you get tired. So sometimes libido needs to be waken up. You need to have some environmental cues, maybe dress differently, do certain different activities to raise that level of libido, because it's very different when you're in your 20s, 30s, 50s, 60s, 80s. So it has to be that a different way of looking at your sexuality, and maybe changing the script, maybe expanding your sexual repertoire, your sexual menu, to make sure it's not only focused on intercourse, but other yummy, pleasurable activities.
So we've got people coming to see you in their 60s, 70s, 80s, and even 90s.
Yep.
What are the main questions that they're asking? And I guess the people fit into two different categories. You've got those who are in a committed relationship, possibly a long-standing relationship, right? So you've gone through the ebbs and flows of life, of desire, of just changes, and I imagine that's changing as you get older. So you've got that cohort of people, and then you've got those who might have found themselves to be single, maybe through divorce, maybe through a partner passing. What if we were to group them into those two categories? What are the most common questions you get from this older cohort about those coming from a committed relationship and wanting to stay in a committed relationship? What are some of the challenges that they are seeing?
Some of the challenges are the libido differences, and I'm going to talk about that. But the other one is more of how do we do this now? Because maybe illness, maybe physical problems, of how do we raise the bar? How do we do a little bit differently to make sure that we both enjoy the essential sexual activities? So the first one where the libido discrepancies, and that's a lot of my clients come.
Isn't that the case through life?
Not unusual. It is completely normal. And sometimes it changes. And one person's libido higher, the other person's lower, and it can switch over. So a lot of them come through that. The other ones are more sort of physiological. As people age, there are hormonal changes, less testosterone for the man, less progesterone, estrogen for the female. So unreliable erections, needing more lubrication, those sort of aspects come into it a lot with painful or difficult intercourse. But that's when we open up the palette of what are other sexual activities they could enjoy, they would enjoy, and how they could explore that, how they could play around that, what are aspects of their abilities, both mental as well as physical abilities, what they could do and what they open to do or not.
And are people coming to you as a couple, or is it one of the spouses coming to you saying this is the challenge we've got in the relationship? Either he can't get it up, or I'm not attracted to him, or whatever the case is. Is it one person predominantly approaching you, or is it as a couple they're trying to solve for this together?
Bit of both. And it's intriguing to me, for example, unreliable erections. Sometimes the penis owner comes to me and it's like, oh my God, I'm embarrassed about this. What could I do about this? And then we go through both medical history, we go through what sort of medication they might be able to utilize, what devices they might use. And then they go back, and sometimes they disclose to their partner that they came to see me or not, other times not. But there are times when the female comes and say, oh, my husband is not able to have an erection, we are not having intercourse, blah, blah, blah. What can I do to help them? But sometimes, and I actually much prefer that, when the couple comes to see me, because when there is a couple problem, there must be a couple solution. Because that way it's more sustained, it's more maintained, and more fun. Because if one person sort of scurries away, and sometimes they don't know what I'm going to talk about, how I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to be respectful. I'm going to embrace where they are and use the language what they are comfortable with. So it's not easy for anybody to come and see a sex therapist, because it's not in the norm for people to say, oh, I went to see a sex therapist on Friday, and they said this and that.
It could be an interesting topic at the retirement village luncheon.
Oh, for sure.
But I guess when I think of those over the age of 60, I wouldn't have thought many would be comfortable talking about it, because they're quite buttoned up usually, right? It's a generation where you're shaking your head. Have I completely mischaracterized?
Well, some are, but I guess the people who arrive in my therapeutic room, they are the ones who are brave enough to come and see me. And some of them are really intriguing even to me. They come, for example, I had this couple who turned up in my room and they said, oh, well, we haven't had sex for a number of years and we want to sort of get back on the horse. And can you help us? And I said, okay, tell me about your sexual histories, your health, etc., etc. And then it turned out that they had quite a spicy sex life beforehand, but then grandchildren arrived and a lot of activities, some new retirees get involved with. So sex sort of fell off the radar. And then they realized this and they thought, oh, well, we go to a sex therapist and she's going to tell us what to do. So it turned out I started to talk about, sex toys and role playing and dressing up. Oh, they said, oh, we've got a whole box of toys. I said, oh, okay then. So why don't you use it? Oh, we sort of forgot about it and all that. I said, okay.
The grandkids are using it.
I didn't ask that. Maybe. So I said, look, maybe you need to take the box out, maybe make sure that it's clean, you change the batteries, all those sort of things. And maybe some of the outfits, again, wash them, make sure they fit and et cetera, et cetera. And then, play with them again and see how it goes. Well, they go away. A few weeks later, they come back. They sit down on my couch and honestly, like two teenagers, they sort of giggle about and all that. And they say, oh, okay, so what's happening? It looks like that you have something to tell me. And they said, oh, yeah, well, we took your advice and we took the box out and everything was clean. And we had a date that we're going to reignite our sexual life. And she put out her outfit on the bed and went for a shower. She came out of the shower and she couldn't believe it. He put on the outfit what she put out for herself.
Oh my gosh.
So they just laughed and they had the most wonderful time. So sometimes, having that path, that catalyst to talk with somebody around what could happen. And I kept saying, you just need to sort of be lighthearted about it. They had really good humor. So obviously they introduced that into that evening and oh my God, they were off and away.
Okay.
I didn't ask for photos.
Yeah. No, thank goodness. Okay, so we've got people who are coming to you as a couple and going through that journey of reconnection.
Yes.
And then we've got some people who we'll talk about this other cohort later, but those who have found themselves alone when they possibly didn't expect it, how they start to navigate new relationships and the sexual impact of those relationships. So we'll come to those. But as we age, our sexual function changes, doesn't it? And the impact of medications also changes that. Is that correct?
Yeah, very
Can you talk to that point for us?
Sure. I think it's really important to acknowledge how we are overall with our health, because a number of those illnesses and conditions in older age, like heart problem, high blood pressure, maybe taking some SSRIs, depression, those medications really impact on sensuality and sexuality and sexual health. So the first point of call would be the GP, the doctors who prescribe these, to make sure that you ask about, is this medication impact on my sexual health? You have to have that ability to ask, but those are the main areas or main group of medications which definitely impact on sexual health, and or the medication you might take, Viagra, Cialis, etc., of how it impacts. However, and most people don't think about alcohol as a drug, but alcohol use impacts greatly on sexual health. So I'm not against alcohol, but having couple of glasses of wine can already impact on sexual health. So maybe modifying alcohol use can be the greatest positive impact on sexual health.
What can you tell us about orgasms? Does that change as you get older?
For some people, definitely. What a lot of people don't realize that the majority of females, over 2/3, prefer clitoral stimulation and orgasm through that. So for penis owners, the fact that actually they don't need a fully erect penis for intercourse can be quite challenging to hear. But orgasm can change, might take longer, might take different type of stimulation. So exploring that and embracing that is important. But I had a client who had a stroke and
Having an orgasm?
no. No, but after stroke, she recovered and she thought, oh, well, my sexuality is not as it was. How do I reconnect with the impacts of stroke? And I talked to her about maybe vibrators, things like that. And she said, oh, no. She was a very traditional lady. And I said, okay, well, what about, and this was a few years ago when those vibrating pillows were quite a thing. And I said, well, what about, a vibrating pillow and just sort of see how it is. And she said, oh, what do you mean? I said, oh, well, you could just sit on that vibrating pillow and see what happens. So I think birthday or Christmas was coming. So she asked the family, that was the thing, to get a vibrating pillow. So she came back.
She asked her adult children.
Yeah, but a vibrating pillow is for her back, of course, or for shoulder. Oh,
right.
Nothing to do with sexuality. Oh, no. No. But she came back afterwards and she said, oh, well, I said, oh, how things? She said, batteries are very expensive. And I said, oh, tell me more. She said, oh, those pillows are really useful.
Oh, my God.
So it turned out that for her, of course, this is where I have to meet where they are. A vibrator, a dildo was out of question. But having a cushion she could sit on and having that stimulation, that really worked for her. So, it's how people accept and expect orgasm and how you get there. And that's where I think seeing somebody professional, independent, is really useful to give ideas and meet them where they are at.
So as we get into our 60s, 70s, 80s, and we've mentioned that there can be a difference in libido levels or the desire to have sexual activity, if I imagine that mismatch can be, well, the mismatch is confronting at any stage of life, but at that stage, if one of the partners is super keen and the other one isn't, it could be a variety of reasons. It could be a function problem. It could be you're just not feeling it, or heaven forbid you've had the stroke and you need the cushion. But how do you navigate that within a relationship? Because you're not wanting, well, I imagine if you don't navigate that well, someone can feel guilty or rejected. That on both sides you can feel like you are drifting apart, possibly
Sidelined, yeah.
over something that was a common, such a strong force in the relationship. How do you navigate that?
It is not easy because as we age, we all have areas we are not comfortable with, either sexual function or body image, or not meeting your partner around intimacy issues. But all of us need touch and positive touch. There's a lot of research around for babies to aged care that without having positive, loving touch, people are not happy and start running away. So making sure that you start with growing those connective activities, and that is to talk about issues, talk about intimate issues, things which matter to you and matter to your partner, and embrace that with more physical activities, and that is sensual activities, stroking, kissing. So making sure that anything what happens are pleasurable, joyful, and doesn't feel like it's a chore, because the worst thing is for somebody to think, oh, well, Bob or Jane, needs me to, kiss their earlobe 3 times and she's going to be happy about it, or whatever it is. So finding things what can lead into a space where they could connect through their bodies as much as through their heart and mind. Because some people connect really well intellectually, having intellectual conversations about how humans can live on the moon or whatever can bring them closer, and then through that they might start cuddling and giving each other hugs, or surprising the other person, pinching the other person's bottom in the supermarket, or, playing footsie under the table when you're having, dinner out. So something which creates that sort of naughtiness again between the two individuals, and start growing that. Because I always tell my clients, I'm not going to ask you to swing off the chandelier if you're not ready, because people need to go through certain stages to get to the place and space where they are, okay, no, I can do that. And that's where you need to sustain and grow. And then hopefully the two of them will find their place and space.
Can your sex life improve as you get in your later years?
Definitely. People can find different ways of expressing their sexuality. How they do that varies. Some find maybe same-sex or having a third person involved, or finding other ways of expressing themselves, especially if they have some physiological issues. So the main issue for aged people, it's not necessarily their lack of erection or atrophy of the vagina. It's more of they have crappy knees, they have bad hips, shoulders, wrists. All those sort of aspects need to have different strategies, different techniques to make sure that they can enjoy and continue sexual activities. And some of that won't be intercourse, could be intercourse. So not necessarily having the penis inside the vagina, but having other stimulation, maybe having solo sex, maybe having masturbation beside each other or together, or celebrating certain aspects of their bodies. So creating different acknowledgement, different perceptions of what sex is, I think that is a major part of people's development and progression in their sex life.
Do you see much insecurity around the aging body within couples? Or is it a sense of, look,
I don't care.
no point worrying, or let's get it on? Like, how does that work? Are people self-conscious or liberated?
Bit of both. I guess a lot of those who's got some issues come to see me, because the people who don't care, they just sort of get on with it.
True.
But we talk about how to manage those aspects. Maybe dimming the lights, maybe having certain lingerie which sort of drapes certain body parts and they feel a little bit more sensual with that. Other people find other ways. I can't think of anything at the moment. What else? But different techniques, different ways of managing how they look, the expectation of the other person, because the majority of these individuals, not all, but have similar age partners. And I always sort of asked, so do you expect your partner to look like a 20-year-old? And they said, no, it's really lovely that they are soft around the edges, or I can take their glasses off so they can't see my wrinkles that much. So, some of those more humorous ways or more realistic ways to get into a space where they accept not just themselves, but their partner and the changes around their partner.
So let's move to retirement villages.
Oh, yeah.
I have heard a lot of stories about retirement villages. I've heard that all the men are randy. I've heard that there's STIs aplenty, and that it's actually a thing that has to be managed by the retirement village operator. I don't know how much of that is myth, but can you shed some light on that?
Well, there's a lot of truth in there. When you put a lot of people of similar age in one space, sexuality will come up sooner or later. And I remember after COVID hit, and of course everything was locked down, especially rest homes, you couldn't move out of your rooms or out of the space. And when the lockdown opened up, I had a number of older people to come and see me. I guess, some of them started new relationships, et cetera. And I recall this couple who were in two different rest homes. The two rest homes are quite close.
Retirement villages.
Yeah.
Sorry,
retirement village.
We know the difference now.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I'm terribly sorry. So anyway, they said, oh, well, we just want to make sure that we're on the right track with our relationship, with our sex life, et cetera, some questions around what to do, what not to do. And then I said, oh, okay, so when did you start your relationship? Oh, we started sort of just before COVID. I said, oh, well, so you're starting your sexual exploration now. And they said, no. I said, oh, what do you mean? You know, we've been in lockdown. Well, they said, oh, we sort of sneaked into each other's spaces.
We're in each other's bubble.
And I said, oh, but that was not right. And they said, oh, well, it wasn't just us. All of us did that. We sort of went and saw.
Oh, my gosh.
So they were like teenagers, so outside of the world. I remember people sort of, oh, you know, all these teenagers meet in the park and all that. And in the meantime, you know, all these people in older generations, the most vulnerable, were meeting us and having sex with each other, you know, exchanging all sorts of bodily fluids during COVID. So, you know, all the people have wonderful time together. So this idea that old people sort of just sit in their room and knit or play chess is not right.
That's not a thing.
Not a thing.
And the ratios are weighted more to female, isn't it? So if you're a guy, you've got your pick.
Well, yeah, especially if you're new.
Right. The new guy on town.
Exactly. The book club ladies have their eyes on you. And some of those gentlemen play the village.
Really?
Others not. So it really depends on the individual. But that's where information and knowledge about what to do and what not to do to keep yourself safe. And this is where, and you mentioned STIs, really important to acknowledge, because old people think, oh, well, I can't get pregnant, I don't need to use a condom. But a third of syphilis cases are in the older generation. So that is rampant because people don't use protection. So it's essential that people know about it and then they do something about it. So making sure that when you're a new relationship, wave it into the conversation that, oh, well, you know, I take some medication for my heart and I have this and I had some, arthritis in my wrist or whatever. And then when it gets to the point where sexuality comes into the picture, maybe say, oh, I had my blood test and, oh, I got, all my STIs checked as well and I'm clean, look. So allow the conversation to clear about that I'm clear. What about you? So otherwise, let's just use a condom just to make sure that we are safe.
That's crazy.
It's reality.
Okay. So have you had to set some policies for retirement villages, and what have been the challenges with that?
A number of these villages have nurses and staff from overseas countries where religion is very much part of how they work. So I was called in to a number of places to make sure that there are guidelines and policies around sensuality and sexuality for residents. I had this call, this was a few years ago, that 2 individuals were having sex and the nurse walked in and ran out screaming, oh my God, these people are having sex, which was really difficult as an employment issue, of course, for the 2 residents. So we had to do some training for all their staff that sexuality is a human right. Unless there is some issues physically for the individuals, if there's no consent, because maybe one person has Alzheimer's, to make sure that there are a number of ticks to make sure that everybody's safe. But it's people's right to have sensual and sexual time with whoever they choose to. Of course, not between staff and residents. So had to do, policy work, put everything in writing, then training for the staff to make sure that they don't use their own maybe religious values or upbringing around this, because just because somebody's a little bit older than you, it doesn't mean that they don't want to have some yummy pleasurable activities.
A bit of fun.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move to the person who finds themselves single later in life.
Yeah.
It may be that they were in a loving relationship and someone's died. It could be that you've divorced because they were painful, or it could be kind of anywhere in between. I imagine it's really challenging navigating relationships, or unless, of course, you go to the retirement village and then you get Randy Andy and then off you go, right? He's probably, let's not talk about Randy Andy. But what are some of the challenges that you've seen, and when they've come to you, what are you hearing have been some of their frustrations and insecurities? Because you're different at 70 than when you were playing the field maybe 50 years earlier.
And the field changed.
And the field's changed.
So it's really important for people to be able to talk it out that, oh, well, actually we were introduced, 50 odd years ago, and then went and had a cup of coffee, and then we started dating, and 3 months later we were married and had children. So creating a space where they know that it is different when you are in your 60s, 70s, 80s or 90s, of finding companionship, finding somebody who you feel attracted to. And that attraction can be physical, but that could be more that you have very similar values, very similar interests, very similar hobbies. So I spend time with these individuals working out what are those places they feel comfortable being. Maybe a painting club, maybe gardening, maybe, I don't know, talking about the Mars or Venus or how we're going to live.
The book club.
The book club. Yeah. So finding those spaces where you could feel comfortable being yourself, being authentic, and then meeting others to find those individuals who you might select out of. Of course, there are some of those people who are very technically savvy, who are on Instagram, who are on Facebook, and they come and say, well, what about some of those apps? And I sort of think, okay, have you looked at them? Have you signed up? And they said, no, this is why I'm here, to talk to you about it. What do I do? So we talk about how to keep themselves and others safe, because what you don't want is that you find that your niece or nephew or whoever is matched with you because you put the wrong age group in.
Imagine.
Well, they find you. Could happen. So working through those different fields and how in different spaces and places you might meet relevant people who might be attracted to you or they attracting.
So if you're starting a relationship and let's say your earlier relationship has ended maybe because of death, right? So that wasn't negative. Maybe you cared for your partner right at the end, but you're in your next chapter, maybe your new era. You want a relationship, but you feel guilty.
Yeah.
And I imagine sometimes your adult children have a bit to say about whether you even have the right to think about companionship beyond their parent. Do you see that at all? And how should that be navigated?
I think it's important to go back to grief and how important that grief process is, and allow that grief process to take place. And grief can be really different for different individuals, but it's a process. And grief is not linear, it goes all over the place and can come out anywhere. So when somebody feels that they are ready to date or maybe find a new companion, being open about the fact that they had their long-term partner pass away 5 months ago, 5 years ago, whatever it is. And more than likely, the other person had previous relationships which ended in one way or another. So that could be a connecting point already with another person. So not pushing it down, but acknowledging it, talking about it, but not overwhelmingly. Because if you go on a date with somebody and all you talk about is how lovely your ex-partner was who passed away, the other person will think, oh, what about me? You know, why am I here?
Yeah, you won't be getting the call back.
Exactly. So allowing a little bit of that, but not overwhelmingly. And if it's still overwhelming, maybe you're not ready. Maybe look for friendships. Maybe look for others who are in similar shoes or who could support you. But I think it's essential to open up the social circles in a way that is safe for you, and to know that if you become emotional because you see a flower which was your partner's favorite flower and you become teary, to be able to say, I'm sorry, you know, I need a little bit of time out. I'm not ready today to continue. Mm-hmm. The other aspect, when relationships sort of blossom, and if all the pictures in the house is with your ex-husband, wife, partner, maybe reduce that a little bit. Not take it all down, but not have the whole house a shrine to the partner before. And again, if you're not ready for that, well, maybe not meet at your house. Maybe meet at their place or at a cafe or maybe in a motel room.
Oh my gosh. This is their first date.
No, I didn't. Well, you never know.
What kind of policies are you writing for this retirement village?
I'm not writing advice. It is policy of making sure that people have choices.
No, I understand. If you could say one thing to people who are in their 60s or 70s about sexuality, or about their sexual confidence, what would be a couple of key messages that you would want to share with our listeners?
That nobody's a mind reader. So tell them what feels good for you. Hold it lightly and think about pleasure. Think about joy. And don't give up, because we all need a little bit of fun in our lives. And sex and sensuality should be fun, should be pleasurable, should be exciting, should be something what you look forward to. And you can. You just have to find the pathway for you and for your partner, if you have one, to get there.
So it doesn't have an expiry date?
No, it does not.
This has been one of the most fascinating conversations we have had on this podcast, but thank you very much for coming in. If people who are listening want to get in touch with a sex therapist, how would they go about that, and what should be the process that they go through so that that remains a safe environment?
It's not easy because, number one, what you want to make sure that the person has good qualifications and they have some experience and expertise. Mm-hmm. So look at their background, look at their bio, but it's very personal of who you feel that you can have that conversation, who you could open up to, who will respect where you are. So sometimes it's a little bit of trial and error, but looking at their profiles, looking at, what they've done in the past is essential, I believe.
Yeah. Well, I think the moral of the story is it's time to get a cushion.
Yay!
Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much.
So, there you have it. Intimacy doesn't have an expiry date. Who knew? So whether you're 62 or 92, you've still got it. But you might just need a bit more communication, a bit more confidence, and maybe a cushion or two. If you enjoyed this episode and you learned a lot, make sure you follow the podcast so you don't miss out on more enlightening conversations like this. We'll see you again soon on the next bit.